Yeah, 13th.
Monday the 13th. Doesn't have the same ring as Friday.
No, not yet. No.
All right. Tweet out the live link. Hop on, record. Hello, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot Podcast here on HawkFanatic.com. Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. Monday, March the 13th. 9:15 a.m. Central Time. No, your week and calendar are not mixed up. We are adjusting again this week as we did last week. Obviously, Big Ten tournaments start this week. National Wrestling in Tulsa, Oklahoma this week. So plenty of going on, and we wanted to start the week and get a chance to talk before we get to work. So that's why we are here. Scott, where to start? A lot of storylines here. We went through Selection Sunday yesterday, and, the typical, this team got robbed, this team shouldn't be in, all that national talk. From a local standpoint, we knew Iowa was in both the men's and women's tournament. It was just a matter of where. Probably some disappointment on both sides. I think the men were hoping for Des Moines. You had said last week you didn't think that was likely. And then the women certainly, I thought, deserved the number one seed, but who do you take off that line? I don't know. I mean, 1-2, Iowa's a 2 seed at home. We'll play Southeastern Louisiana on, we got the time of that is Friday, approximately 3 p.m. at Carver. If you don't have your tickets yet and you're listening to this live and on the YouTube feed, you better get at it, because I was on there at 9:00 this morning and I'm in row 33. So you may want to get on that quick. Scott and I will be at Carver for the women's opening rounds, I would assume, unless there's an epic upset in the first round for the Iowa women. And looking forward to it. Scott was there last year when they got upset by Creighton. So a lot of storylines we'll get to here, but just your overall thoughts when you saw each bracket come out for Iowa.
Yeah, good morning, Rob. I hope you're feeling better.
5 days is over. The COVID 5-day quarantine is over. I can go to Hy-Vee today, and we need it.
Yeah, isn't it strange, Rob? I mean, compared to 3 years ago at this time, where the world was shutting down and we didn't know what we were going to embark on and how crazy it was, and now it's just kind of like a nasty cold. That's a good thing in this world, especially you've been vaxxed probably 4 times, I think.
However many there have been are in me.
Yeah. I guess starting with the men, because it just took place earlier. I thought an 8 seed was actually pretty high. I didn't think that they probably deserved that at 19 and 13. And some of the losses that they had, not necessarily Eastern Illinois is one of those trip on the sidewalk moments, but the getting swept by Wisconsin and Nebraska, losing to Penn State, getting beat 2 out of 3 by Ohio State. Those types of games to me kind of suggested that this team was probably more on the 10 line than the 8. But to get an 8, that's probably a pretty good thing for Iowa. And now the location, it is a road trip. I mean, going to Birmingham, Alabama to play Auburn, that is like it would be like if Iowa was the 9 seed in Des Moines playing Arkansas. I mean, it's really about the same thing. I mean, Birmingham is not next. It's like 2 hours away from Auburn. And there's a sizable amount of players or fans there. Now, as Connor McCaffrey pointed out, and I think that makes a lot of sense, is Alabama is also there. And so Alabama fans will not cheer for Auburn. So kind of like Iowa fans and Iowa State fans will not cheer for one another. So you might get a little bit more of a home crowd, even though they grit their teeth and plug their nose because it's a Big Ten team. They're going against the SEC, but still, it's I think overall it's a great seed for Iowa. They're playing a team that's it contrast in style, no question. Defensive minded. It's going to be if you can't shoot, you're going to lose and probably lose decisively. If you can win emphatically. So I think there's a lot of advantages. And I would say if you're going to play a number 1 seed, I mean, Houston's a good team, but Houston's not infallible. I mean, they've got some weaknesses Iowa could exploit if it's playing at a high level, in certain ways. So overall, I think this is about as good as you can get based on the season you had.
Yeah, and you look at it, Scott, overall seed wise, Iowa was a 32. Iowa's the 32nd. That's pretty. They got a lot of I guess credit for the wins this year, and that was what we were wondering how the good wins would be measured against the bad losses that you mentioned. And Iowa beat some, I think eight teams has 8 wins against tournament teams this year. Is that right? I think I saw that in Weitzel's notes. So, that's a decent amount. And what was Auburn? 36, 35. So 32, 35. I saw the first line that Bet Rivers had was Auburn -1, Iowa +1. So that lets you know right there, this is a coin flip game, and it's an 8-9. It's what you would expect.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that the crowd dynamic will be interesting. How well will Iowa travel? How far of a drive is it to Birmingham?
Just ballparking it, I would probably put it at least 10 hours.
Yeah, that's miserable.
Yeah, I mean, after driving to Nashville, and that was 8, probably. And well, that was a bad weather drive that took, 11 the first time. But yeah, I would say at least 10 is my guess, maybe 11. So
Google estimate is 11 hours and 17 minutes. You were right. So 757 miles.
So in other words, for somebody who always tries to beat the GPS, so it's about 10 and a half hours.
Yes. Yeah.
Unless I've got my unless I got my wife with me, then there's a few more pit stops on the road back. But I don't know. I mean, I could see some fans going, but I don't think a large contingent will go because it's just it's far. There's just a lot of probably.
It's spring break around here too for the college and for high schools and. So people have plans. Yeah.
And you also think about it that there are some people who will go to the women's game instead, who just, you look at Iowa and men's basketball. Sure. They could win one. They could even pose one of the big upsets of the tournament and beat Houston.
And that's the thing. You win 2, you're in Kansas City.
Yeah. But then you look and you say the women are a 2 seed, probably the number 5 overall. They've got an opportunity to do something special, and they've had a special year. And that's always the weird part about getting to this point is now, the cliche is you can just wipe the records clean, everybody's starting over again. And that's true to an extent, but 5 months worth of residue. And it's just more of a, culmination to what your season is. So I don't think there's a lot of expectations. I don't think there's a lot of, last year the trajectory was upward after the Big Ten tournament for the men. 2 years ago, they were a 2 seed, even though they were, in the bubble there. So, but this year it's just kind of been a disjointed season with some mostly a roller coaster. So it's hard to say. I'm not saying fans won't cheer for them by any stretch, but just the fact that it's, nobody's going, man, they're going to go to the Final Four this year, where the women, you're thinking that that's a real possibility.
Yeah, the men have made the Sweet 16 twice in the last 34 years. And it's been, 23 seasons since are we up to that now? Yeah,
24.
We're getting this will be
the 24th. So
take the COVID out.
Yeah, true. Okay, you're right. Yeah.
So yeah, COVID adjusted statistics. we're always gonna have that
Yeah.
year, that 2020. But yeah, who knows? I mean, they were hot as heck going into last year off a Big Ten tournament championship and fell flat on their face against Richmond. You just never know. We talked about it briefly before we started recording. The NCAA tournament is great for the very reason that it's unpredictable in a lot of ways, especially early.
Mhm.
So once you get on there, I think a number one seed has won the last 5. So as you get on, the upsets become a little bit, you don't see a lot of St. Peter's. It happens, but it's not, these are when they happen, getting to that Sweet 16. And I'm with you. I think this is, if you were to say, all right, you get to choose which number one seed you have to face in the second round. I think Iowa, not publicly, but I think they would have picked Houston.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Because Alabama has just incredible athletes.
Yeah.
They would be a very difficult team. So Maryland, good luck to you if you pass West Virginia. Kansas and Des Moines would be interesting, but Kansas, is going to bring a lot of fans too. And, it might be a mix. If they were to play Kansas, it might be 50-50 in Des Moines. But I think in that situation, if you're Kansas, you kind of understand who you're facing, that it's okay. We're kind of on the road here. We know we're playing a pretty good team, a pretty good program from a major conference. And so the mental aspect, you're not going to surprise them. But with Houston being in Alabama, you just don't know what they're going to think. And then with Marcus Sasser, who's been injured, and I don't know how, he didn't play, I think, this weekend. And
he went out, I think, in the semis and did not play in the final, and they got pounded by Memphis.
Yeah. So I kind of wonder, what'll end up happening there. So, and I watched the Northern Kentucky game because I had to do like 18 capsules for our regional previews. And oh my God, I don't ever want to have to do that again. I split half the Big Ten. I did the ACC, and then I did about 6 or 7 one bid conferences. And so it was like, and I'm not, basketball is okay with me, but it's, like if you're to ask me there are 3 big events that all happen this single weekend going in today. The Oscars are clearly third. I could not care less about the Oscars.
We had them on last night, but it was I was very casually looking while my family was watching and I was working on my laptop. But I wanted to be present, be a good family member. So I sat on the couch with my laptop and didn't really pay much attention to what was going on.
If I was, if my family cared, then I would probably do the same thing. That would be the most. But I don't see any of those movies except
I don't either.
All's Quiet on the Western Front. I did watch that.
Did you see that? Okay.
That was.
You didn't see the Top Gun?
Not yet. Not until it comes to one of my 15 different apps that I have here.
I don't think I saw any of the movies that were nominated, to be honest with you, now that I think about it. Not that I could name them all, but I don't go to the movies. I haven't been in the movie theater in a long time. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I went to 80 for Brady. That was fun. But number 2 for me would be, and I know this will probably be like, what are you thinking? It is probably the Selection Sunday part of it. I like it and I get into it. Don't get me wrong. But number 1 for me is definitely free agent frenzy in the NFL. I am just, on pins and needles. And I know this could be happy Aaron Rodgers day for you and your Jets. So we'll see what happens there. But no, so, I mean, of all the 3, that's kind of how I shape it up. And I went to Carver yesterday for both the men's and women's pressers. And, it was really a different feel between the 2. I thought it was really fascinating. The men were, the players were just kind of matter of fact. Fran was incredibly monotone, which is typical for this time of year. And it's always kind of baffled me, not that there's, and it's just, I don't know if it's a personality or if he just thinks we're a bunch of idiots and doesn't want to, I guess we'll talk about this. And then, and then the women were very excited, is to be expected. There was a little bit of a, factor when they didn't get the number 1. And even Lisa Bluter did that and started laughing and which is funny. And, but I think overall they were fine with what was going on. In fact, they're going to play at home for 2 games. they couldn't ask for more. So, and they invited people to come in and watch it with them. The men did it privately as always. So it was just two different moods, I thought.
Yeah, and really that's what I wrote about for today for my column was basically this time of year, it's always judgment time. You're judged really what you do in the big tournament. The women have back-to-back Big Ten tournament championships, great accomplishment. But we talked about it last week, Scott. This is the proving ground. What is your legacy? And from the women's perspective, and we'll talk more about the women's matchups here too as we get along, but just from an overall overarching viewpoint, the women have the game's best player, the best player in the country. So she's playing for her legacy. The two players in Iowa history who have their numbers retired, Michelle Edwards, Megan Gustafson, both led their teams to Elite Eights. So that's kind of a measuring stick for her. She's going to be compared to other really good, some of the best players that have ever played the game. This is kind of where did she get her team when she was at Iowa? How far did her team go? So that's a measuring stick for her. For Cesano and for Warnock, this is their last ride. Cesano's been, she's had an incredible career, but how far can she go? What's her legacy? And then, for Lisa Bluter, she's been a coach for a long time. Can she get a team to the Final Four? She's the winningest coach, program history. So there's a lot there legacy wise. And then I'll switch quickly to the men and let you go. We kind of have outlined for them, 2 Sweet 16s in 34 years, 23 years since the last one. Fair or not, Scott, that's the albatross they carry can this program finally break through and get to the second weekend again? And that's really what it'll be judged by.
Right. It was funny when my old days when I went home and away with Iowa basketball, Morehouse would say that Iowa has great history, but not great tradition. And that's kind of what's been building in men's basketball for the last generation and a half. Because as you said, Connor
McCaffrey was not quite a year old the last time they made the Sweet 16, and he'll be 25 in June.
Exactly. My son will be 24 in May, and he was not born when they went to the last Sweet 16. And before that, it was 88. So, you said 2 in 34 years. Really, it's, 1 in 34 years, because since then they've only been to that one. And that was kind of like if they made it, just kind of it was a good year. They got hot and they beat the right team at the right time. And then they got into the tournament. So there were some moments where I think there are some parallels with this team and that 99 team, but they've had opportunities, and we know that, that over Fran's career that, the 14 team, had that, lost 7 out of 8 but it was ranked 10th in the country at one point. There were a lot of issues. I don't think, like with Patrick getting cancer and stuff like that. That one's really not a fair one to kind of chide them. But 16, they're ranked as high as 3rd. They were started off like 10-1 in the
14 was Dayton, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And 16 was when they started off 10-1 in the Big Ten and ended up 12-6, and then split their tournament games. They won on the buzzer in overtime against Temple and then got crushed by Villanova. That was one where you're like, okay, it's one thing to lose to the champ, which was Villanova, but it's another thing to have to play them at all in when that year was a Des Moines year, and that year was also a St. Louis year. And you had, I think it was Wisconsin, ended up in St. Louis. And all he had to do was beat Wisconsin once, and you're probably in St. Louis instead as a 7 seed, and they got to the Sweet 16. And then you look at the last couple of years. 2 years ago, they were a 2 seed, and they played Oregon, and they got mopped there. And then last year, entering as hot as they ever have, they finally won the Big Ten tournament again, and then could not do anything offensively that resembled what they looked like all year long, and then lose in the first round. So there's a lot of disappointment, and it's just been perpetual now. And we could talk what Iowa was like before Fran, but he's been here 13 years now. I mean,
Same as Tom Davis, right?
Yeah,
Is
exactly.
this Fran's 12th year?
This is his 13th.
Okay, so he matched Tom
Yeah.
Davis, right? They both okay.
Yeah, so his tenure is as long as Tom Davis. And now, granted, they both entered differently.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, you have the greatest collection of Iowa players to start your career, and then you have arguably, the least talented other than Matt Gatens at that point. But that said, they've been very parallel throughout. And I think you wonder, there was a push. You do remember it. You were at the Press Citizen at that time. There seemed to be such a strong push to get change that, they were settling. We hear it sometimes in football too, but
the next level.
You're right.
Getting to the next level was that was kind of the battle cry when they wanted when Bowlesby decided to cut Tom Davis loose.
Yeah, and so at this point, what happens if they go the one and done, or even if they win their first game and get blown out by Houston, which is a strong possibility, I would think. I mean, they could win, but
is it a yawn? Yeah, we've seen that.
Yeah, but does it get to the point, and then you start to look at who's leaving? Chris Murray will go to the draft. Philip Bracho will probably go to Europe. Can they get in the portal and get people to do that? I mean, Connor McCaffrey's been a really good player for them. I think I wouldn't necessarily think that the newcomers will come in and be all conference players right away and replace Chris Murray and Philip Bracha in that regard. So next year could be a tough year, or at least a middling year. And so then at that point, what's kind of the prospects for Iowa? Does apathy settle in? I think that's a real possibility with this program.
Has it already settled in? I mean, some of the crowds this year were not good.
Yeah. They did have sellouts towards the end.
Yeah, they did at the end. They did for sure.
But, I wonder, I guess talking to fans as often as we do that, they want to see greatness, but I don't know that they expect it. And that's kind of a dangerous spot, because let's say the trajectory is that this year, let's give them they hold seed. They win by 4 points against Auburn, and then they lose by 10 to Houston at that point. And then you look at who's all leaving. It seems a real possibility that there'd be a step back. How will fans react? In the face of the women's team is completely surging in that direction. There is so much energy and interest with the women, whereas with the men, it's almost like, oh well, move on. I don't know. That's scary.
Yeah, it certainly is. And we've gotten to this point again of, here we are. We're looking at the bracket and we're going, can this team get the gorilla off? Can this program get the gorilla? Can this team get the gorilla off the program's back? Because that's really what it is. Every team each year, and it's, this, Scott, because you've interacted with them through the years. Iowa basketball fans are really passionate, man. They love it, and they are so hungry for success. And it's almost like, it's a tired cliche, but that Lucy in the football with Charlie Brown, and you're just like, I don't want to get hurt again. I've got all these scars from the years from the Northwestern State or the Oregon game and Richmond last year and the overtime loss to Tennessee, and, go on and on through the years here during this drought. And it's just, I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to get hurt in this relationship again. And that's why I think there's just people kind of are just taking a wait and see. And that's probably the smart approach.
Yeah. And because they want to, they're scared to get hurt. You're absolutely right. There just seems to be a hedging on embracing this team. And that's really program wide in so many different ways. It's football going 6-0 and being ranked second in the country, and kind of, when is the other shoe going to drop? Well, it did, it's, or go to the Big Ten championship game and the first time, and have an excruciating loss and then get blown out in the Rose Bowl. And the women's team's having some good teams, having the player of the year and not doing it either. But it's worse in basketball. It's like there have been a lot of gut punches in football, but these are like below the gut punches in basketball. I wrote it when I was with the Gazette. I think it was in the 2016 tournament. I said, the higher they fly, the harder they hit the ground and when they fall. And you look at everything from, and we've heard all these stories, even if we are too young, the Ronnie Lester in 1980. I remember distinctly the 87 season, and how good they were and deep they were. And then, have a 20-point lead on UNLV and then lose. And, even old timers with the 1970 team.
Yeah.
That still has the Big Ten record for average points per game at 102.9. How incredible is that? That'll never be broken. And yet to lose by Pembroke Burrows tip in at the buzzer. And then even before that, playing Bill Russell in the NCAA finals and stuff. So all this is like there's a callus there.
A lot of scar tissue.
Yeah.
It's just built up.
And so it's really kind of difficult. And so and the problem that Fran faces now is that they were close enough to break through, I think, the last couple of years. That certainly the last two, when they had Garza, they had Garza and Keegan Murray, 2 first-team All-Americans, and they still get rolled by Oregon. Garza scores 36 points, and they, it's kind of reminds me of Blazing Saddles, where they, when the bad guys are coming after them and then they're in the desert, they set up the toll booth and we need to go get a shitload of dimes. That's what they needed to do with the guards that day, because Oregon's guards just did whatever the hell they wanted to do. And then last year to have such a high and then a low, that was just like 2006. It's perpetual. And so, people protect themselves against that kind of hurt. And this is that year where if they do get to the Sweet 16, there'll be a lot of conflicted feelings because there wasn't the buildup of the excitement like there is with women. And then of course there's the, if they actually get that far and that they could be playing Indiana again.
Drake.
Drake
Miami. And Iowa and Kansas City.
Wow. And then have Iowa State versus Penn State in the other game. Oh, yeah. Imagine that if they had to play Drake in the Sweet 16 and Iowa State in the Elite Eight.
Better stock up on the beer, KC.
Oh my God. Can you imagine Kansas City?
KC better get ready for that.
Oh,
or not.
Yeah, I think it might end up being like Houston and Texas and maybe Iowa State, who knows, Xavier, something. But I think they would love to have Iowa and Iowa State simply from the fans would be insane on the plaza, but and the Light District. But no, I don't know. I'm rambling, but it would be a weird scenario. If they got past it, I think there would be a lot of excitement, but it would be tempered almost, like there wasn't enough emotional buildup through the course of the year to really take advantage of it and celebrate it.
Yes. And we will talk more after the season kind of about what, I don't want to say the future of this program, but kind of we saw it with football after the season with the transfer portal. I think we're going to see something. Maybe not. I don't think Iowa basketball is going to get that much volume, but it's all relative roster size, right? Iowa's probably going to get into the portal and there will be a player or two from the portal. We'll talk kind of about how that shakes out and needs and some names. I've seen some names floated out there, but we'll table that till after the season. Let's take a break now, and we'll come back, talk a little bit more about Auburn, give people a little bit of preview of what they're about, and then get into the women's bracket and kind of how things shape up for the women as well. Want to let folks know that support for this podcast and all podcasts here on Hawk Fanatic come from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities. and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That's sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited. Let's hear from a few more sponsors, and Scott and I will be back on the other side. Hang in there. And we are back. Thank you for hanging in there. Thank you to our sponsors. Scott, I pulled up the Ken Palm. Always interested to look at his numbers and metrics. If you look at adjusted offense, adjusted defense, Iowa is number 3 nationally in adjusted offense, number 167 in adjusted defense. Auburn is 48 in adjusted offense, 29 in adjusted defense. So you look at the Ken Palm numbers, and as you said, a contrast in styles. Auburn's leading scorer, I believe, is 6'10 or 6'11. Mm-hmm. They've got some size, which with Iowa's roster is always something to keep an eye on. Common opponents. Look through that a little bit. Northwestern, common opponent. Would 1 point win? 1 point win for Auburn back in November 23rd in Cancun.
In Cancun, it was 43-42.
A Licklider special.
Yes. So it was Northwestern playing a little bit down and them playing an incredible defensive game. But
I'm sorry I missed that one.
Yeah, that was over Thanksgiving break area. So
I saw that years ago when Michigan State came to Carver.
I've seen a few, unfortunately, and it's we're 2 days short of the 13th anniversary of Happy Licklider Gone Day. But
when Scott was roaming the offices over in Carver Hawkeye Arena.
I was standing outside his office that morning. I had heard that it was going to happen at 9 a.m. and I was out there before he was. And 8 minutes later, hey, Todd, and he just kept walking. So I knew something was up there. But here's some of the things with with Auburn, as you mentioned. John Broomey, I think is how you pronounce it. He was the Ohio Valley Conference Defensive Player of the Year last year, and then transferred in. And he's 6'10", sophomore, 14 points, 8.4 rebounds per game, 2.3 blocks. Just a very tough, tenacious defender in the post, and they kind of play that style throughout, which is why they're as high as they are in defensive efficiency. They've had some tough losses. I would say the Alabama loss in overtime at the end of the year was difficult for them. 90-85. Bruce Pearl kind of got testy after that one about the officiating. So we got two guys who love the officials. That's going to go well. And then you have, they beat Tennessee, which is like the complete net darling. I don't know that they left the top 5 all year in the net.
I'm not referencing the net on this podcast. No. I'm done with the net.
Okay, good.
But you can.
Okay. It's like the selection committee with these college football playoff. And that's how we'll do it. Like, all right, once it's done, it's done.
I will say that Rutgers should have been in. That was bull.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was surprised. When it came down the stretch, I was like, wait a minute, no Rutgers. I thought Rutgers would be in Dayton or something like that. I think Penn State knocked them out. But either way, I would just say that overall, they blew out Kentucky. They beat, they blew out Missouri. They got blown out by Kentucky. So they've got a resume that's really similar. Their Tennessee game was 46-43 that they lost. So this is a team that's, capable of really clamping you down. And if Iowa's road woes continue shooting the basketball, especially from 3, this could be a very difficult game because they could be out rebounded, and then they'll probably, certainly be out physical depending on the way the game is officiated.
Exactly. That was the point I was going to make. You talked about the officiating, and that's so important. How is this game going to be called? You saw Iowa's last two games this season, Nebraska, Ohio State. Those teams got their pace against Iowa. They slowed Iowa down. I'm wondering, Scott, if Iowa needs to force tempo here, press, do things to get the game sped up a little bit rather than allowing it to come to them being passive. Be interesting to see what the approach here is in this one, because it's obvious Auburn's going to want to slow this down and make it a rock fight, and that's not good for Iowa.
It's never been good, and it's really not good now. You know, that there have been a few years there where they could play at that pace. I think when Garza was there, they could. Right.
The Woodbury teams could a little bit.
Yeah, when you had Woodbury and Uthoff and Aaron White, you could play that style and throw down and be all right, but not this team. I mean, and Rebraca is so instrumental to this team in so many different ways. I mean, I think he's the MVP for this team. I think the way he's played and performed this year, they would not be anywhere near where they'd be. And it's not just about scoring. It's just about attention. It's about fighting in the post and doing all those things. And he's going to face a guy that's pretty damn good. And it could be an accidental, again, officiating. He gets 2 quick fouls. They're dead in the water.
Touch foul here and there, something on a hedge.
Yeah.
You know, you hedge out and boom, the guard cause, those are the things you really have to be careful of.
Exactly. So they're going to have to play that way. But I agree with you emphatically that getting into the press after a make is going to be critical for them to force the action at their pace and get into a transitional opportunity, because then they're good. Then they are capable. If they're in transition a lot of the game, they are very capable of beating, hell, everybody, because if Purdue's a 1, and they are, then you look at this team and go, yeah, I think there's some opportunities here to go somewhere. But if they don't, and you get a touch foul, if they're passive, if they continue to shoot less than 30% from 3 on the road, like they did the other day, then it's going to be a really tough game. And you've got fans that will cheer. There'll be more passionate fans for Auburn, and it is a different session. So it's not like, the Alabama fans will want to pay for 4 games, maybe just 2, So I think that, but this team's wired differently, as we've seen. The way they played in Indiana gives me some curiosity that they could go on the road, kind of a us versus the world mentality and do something. But still, it could be it could be a grind. And if it is, it could be a tough game for Iowa.
It's in there. That's kind of the Jekyll and Hyde nature of this team, where, again, we've been over it, every podcast, the ugly losses and the impressive wins, and just playing well against, they played well against Purdue, or at least kept the game close. The last 2 years they've been able to do that against good Purdue teams. So Auburn does have balance. I noticed that just going through statistics. I haven't watched any games yet. I'll probably go back and try to skim through some games of theirs this week. But 4 players in double figures, averaging scoring in double figures. So they spread it out a little bit. They go deep, play a lot of guys, a lot of minutes spread out throughout their roster. I didn't look at rebounding wise. That's something that's hurt Iowa at times this year. Not sure how good Auburn is as a rebounding team. Any insight on that, Scott? Sorry, I had to hit you with that.
Oh yeah, and I made sure before this to print off the box or the rundown. It's rebounding wise, it's even. The one thing I would go to, and here's probably the best key to them, and I think, and they're both really comparable in this. Rebound margin is more important to me than rebounds.
Yes,
because it's how you stack up in those games, because sometimes you miss a lot, sometimes you don't. And they're plus 1.2, Iowa's plus 1.8, so that's pretty even, and it just kind of depends on the game and the style and how you miss those shots. But so this one's a tough one to read, because this is why people sometimes who have no idea what to expect in tournaments, win brackets.
That's why people who pick mascots.
Yes, I know. It's like, oh yeah, I know. I always use this, and my wife gets mad now, but back in the day, she was like, oh, my name's Meredith, and Maryland. That sounds like Meredith, so I'll go with them. And then they had, then they went and Juan Dixon and those guys, and they beat Kansas to win.
It's funny you say that, and maybe that's like the kindred spirit thing.
Yeah.
I don't remember if we were at the Press Citizen at the time, but I was in a pool with Catherine, and she picked Maryland as well and won that pool that same year. Yeah, that's exactly. Funny.
Yeah, right.
Maybe that was the turtle.
Yeah, it must have been, but it's
how
just,
can you not like a turtle?
Yeah, I mean,
you never hear people speak ill of turtles,
right? I mean, hawks, getting, well, I guess they get rid of barn rats, so good for them. But but gophers, gophers, I can tell you from experience, I don't like them, but in real life, I'm like,
I've never come across a gopher. Have you had some situations with gophers? I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I wish. Well, I'm not going to, tell people exactly what happened to them when I caught them, but I will say that they did ruin parts of my backyard.
Oh no. I'm hearing the Caddyshack theme song now.
Yeah, there was no blown up. By the way, that was, to me, is still the commercial of the Super Bowl when what's his name, Brian. Gosh darn it! But anyway, yeah, he played Ted Knight's character, Judge Smales, in that commercial over the Super Bowl. But anyway, yeah. Maryland, back it up here. That's why with this matchup, I could see so many things here going on that it's like, how do you pick it? I mean, can you pick it? So it's going to be a couple possessions to me is probably what's going to happen. If there's a blowout, I think Iowa gets it, just because of their transition opportunities. And if they shoot the ball well, they'll be tough for Auburn to stop. But if Iowa struggles shooting the ball and the pace is not right, then that's when it could be a really difficult grind for Iowa. And so I don't know, flip a coin, I guess.
Toss-up game. I looked, somebody at Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, somebody in their mathematics department did an updated percentage of reaching the Sweet 16 by seed. And I believe the 8 seed is about 10%. So if you're looking at Iowa's chances of breaking the drought, you got about a 10% chance. So,
and you look at this bracket though, Rob. I mean, I've been watching this especially the last month, and I'm telling you what, there is not a team in this tournament that can't be beat. There's not one. No. This is, you could call it parity, you could call it mediocrity, whatever you want to call it. But I'm looking at, Kansas got beat by 20. Houston got blew out. Alabama is playing well now, but Oklahoma, the worst team in the Big 12, beat it by 20 some points. Purdue has lost some games. And then you go to the next, the twos aren't, again, Marquette. Does that really scare you?
I mean, Penn State pushed Purdue yesterday.
Yeah.
In that championship game.
Here's a funny anecdote. With 5:19 left, they were down 14, 15 points. And that was the last capsule I had to do for our regional preview.
Of course.
And so I'm like, and then it was like 4:15-ish or whatever. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to Carver. And I sent it in and I said, I will happily update this if the outcome changes. I got there into the press room where the TV was on with 3.3 seconds left. Penn State had the ball down 2. I'm like, oh my God, really? And then, then of course, I think it was a travel, which killed.
Yeah, that was not what was drawn up.
No,
that was Micah Shrewsbury in the huddle.
That's kind of like getting sacked on a Hail Mary. You're like, come on, but anyway, you look at all these teams and I'm like, I could see anything happening this year. Are you going to pick chalk seeds? Good luck. Maybe you'll get farther just simply because there's going to be so much chaos. But I think part of the interesting dynamic now, Scott, is what we talked about earlier with transfer portal Mhm.
Teams that go that route to build a roster or use freshmen. Like you look at a team like Duke that's
Mhm.
got really good freshmen it's finally gelling now at the
Right.
season's gone on. Ohio State played its best basketball really in the Big Ten tournament once those freshmen and transfers kind of gelled together. So that's really unpredictable. Which of those teams may come together and make a run now?
Right. Well, Duke to me is one, as you said, because I wrote their capsule, I paid more attention to them, and they are one that's really ascending, and no question. And they played really well this weekend and won the ACC, and they're a 5 seed. And I'm like, oh, they're underseeded, and they can beat Tennessee without question. Now, Oral Roberts is not an easy matchup in the first round. That might be more difficult than playing Tennessee. And then if they play the Sweet 16 against Purdue, again, I've seen better Purdue teams, in recent years than this one that weren't a number 1 seed, that were more capable. I mean, I'm not saying
they rely so much on Edey.
Yes.
I mean, if he were to get in foul trouble or something, they rely so much on him.
Right. I mean, they don't have Jaden Ivey, and they don't have, Carson Edwards. I mean, some of those players, those guards that used to
freshman point guard.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. Being in Columbus, I think they'll probably win too, but Memphis could be a tough matchup for them.
Yeah.
Or Florida Atlantic for that matter. I mean, they were kind of underseeded, I thought, being a 9. You look around UCLA, they're just preliminarily, without getting too much into it, they're the team I think is going to win it. I think they're pretty good. Kansas, So you look at all this stuff and you're like, anybody could beat anybody. It could be a very chaotic tournament bracket. So why can't Iowa do that? I don't see any reason why they can't. I can see a lot of reasons why they can't advance very far, but still, why not? It'd be a fun little couple of week period if they do it.
So did I hear that correctly? You've got UCLA winning it all?
We had to have something in by 10 o'clock last night. And I'm like, I don't know, this is a tough year. And so I think, and now this is not my bracket yet, for the money, but I think
what you're telling folks is do not take it to the bank.
No, I wouldn't do that. Maybe for $1 or something. I think I went Alabama, Texas, UCLA, and Duke.
I haven't gotten through mine yet. My family was feverishly filling out their brackets last night, but I have not gotten a chance to do that yet. I'll take a closer look today, but I like UCLA like you. I like Duke, which means those teams will probably get upset early.
Yeah, Northwestern will beat UCLA, and as a prelude to a great Big Ten rivalry in a couple of years. And
interesting. Well, let's finish up the men's discussion on that, Scott. A lot of 7, 8, 9, 10-ish Big Ten. We wondered with the parity in the Big Ten and that jam in the middle of the conference this year, how things would shake out in terms of NCAA tournament seeds. A lot of these teams have uphill battles.
Mm-hmm. Right, because they're all going to be playing that second round game against a supposed elite team. And when you're looking at the 7s include Northwestern and Michigan State, the 8s include Maryland and Iowa, the 9s include Illinois. So you've got, and then 10, you got Penn State. So yeah, they're all jammed together. And then USC, because you can count them now, I suppose. But
yes, UCLA.
Yeah, and then UCLA, hey, we got a 2 there.
Big Ten. Go Big Ten.
B1G. There's a ton there. There's 6 teams in between 7 and 10. So that's
and that's where we create this narrative, right? Like last year, Big Ten had all high seeds and fell flat, for lack of a better term. Maybe this year with these middling seeds, maybe somebody makes a run. Maybe a couple teams make a run into that second weekend.
You know what? If there was a team that I think has a good chance of that, it's probably Michigan State.
Yeah.
Because they're playing USC. I don't see any reason why they can't win that game. Then they'd play Marquette in Columbus. You know what? This is not the same Michigan State teams that we'd seen over the past either. But they still have a Hall of Fame coach and
veteran guards.
Yeah, they're still okay. And then if they get in the Sweet 16, they're playing Kansas State or Kentucky, largely one of those two teams. They can't, you can't tell me they can't beat them. And then at the end, Duke or Purdue or Tennessee or somebody like that, then maybe they lose there. But I think they're probably got the best out of that bunch. Iowa is, not to be too provincial, but Iowa beats Auburn and then goes and plays its game and beats Houston. The Sweet 16 could be against their best friends, the Indiana Hoosiers, or Drake, as you said. That would be something, or Miami Hurricanes. I don't know. There's so much to talk about here, and I don't know that I know enough to that I could predict any of this. But I tell you what, if there's one thing I'll add, and then I'll be quiet on this, is if I was devising the tournament, I would make one flip and one flip only. I would put Illinois as the 8 against Auburn, so Bruce Pearl can play the Illini. That's always
I like it.
And then Iowa in Des Moines against Arkansas. So the Arkansas Razorbacks against Iowa, but that way you're in Des Moines.
Yeah.
So,
I was hoping for Des Moines, but I wasn't counting on it.
No, not with Jamie Pollard on the committee.
All right, let's take one more break here, hear from a few more sponsors, and Scott and I will be back on the other side, and we will dive into the women's bracket a little bit and see how it shapes up for the Hawkeyes. And we are back. Thank you to our sponsors, bringing you these podcasts, allowing us to bring you these podcasts for free every week. Appreciate their support. You guys for listening. Please check sponsors out. We would appreciate that. Scott, looking at this one, we now, as we said, have a times for those games on Friday. The first game is going to be interesting. And if you've got women's tickets, you have to pay for it anyway.
Yeah.
So go over and watch 7th seeded Florida State against 10th seeded Georgia, an ACC SEC matchup. What time's that tip? 12:30?
12:30. Yeah. It's the curtain raiser to Iowa and Southeast Louisiana. So I don't know much about those two teams yet. I need to look at, be more in tune with them. But I mean, on the surface, it looks like a really good matchup. I mean, two big leagues and two teams that I think is it the Georgia coach who played at Iowa, Kitty Abrahamson?
You might be right. I think that might be correct.
Yeah.
I don't know much as you. I don't know much about these two squads.
So
yeah,
and we'll know enough just to pretend we know something. That's what I try to do.
I know both have a good history.
Yeah, right. So, that's it's an interesting matchup, if nothing else, of teams that have, good histories. And then Iowa, Southeast Louisiana, this is on the surface of it, what the 215 matchup means, but this is a team that, won its league, the Southland. It also won its league tournament. And it had, some pretty good teams. They had a tournament MVP and a selection, and then they just also had several all Southland players and the all Southland head coach. So, this is a team that's probably got some veterans to it without really, again, pouring over too much of its roster, but it's one that I'm sure is excited about the opportunity to play in front of a full crowd and play against the best player in the country. And it's just going to be, and with that means that Iowa will have to play somewhat patient, at least a little bit early, and then allow its athletic ability and its, discipline and everything to work for it. And then that's when you blow them out. But the thing is with Iowa, against teams like this, you just kind of withstand the early, heavy dose of what they're going to pull at you, be disciplined, and then pull away in the second quarter and beyond.
Looking at some teams that Southeastern Louisiana has played this year, Scott, non-conference wise, Won at Utah State, lost 99-62 at Utah, but this one stuck out to me. And then again, this is from the end of November. Lost by 8 at LSU.
Yeah, you're right. That one is a big one. And at 10 at Alabama. So,
Yep.
But LSU, I mean, as good as they are, they're one of number 3 seeds. So,
Yep.
That's it. Okay. And both now the sessions are sold out officially.
The women's basketball.
Yeah.
Good thing I got in before we started recording.
73 minutes. We got a press release from when they officially.
Well, sorry, folks. If you didn't get in, you're going to have to go to the secondary market.
Yeah. Sorry, folks.
And I'm not selling mine.
Yeah. Park's closed, folks. But the fact that they went on the road, now that's one of those, it's kind of like you and I playing Iowa, or, Drake played Iowa really tough too, and winning overtime. In-state games for teams punching up, it's a big deal. And so how much of that was LSU being disinterested? How much of it was Southeast Louisiana playing its best game of the year? Still, you got to be prepared for that because they're capable. If Iowa, and Iowa's had its games where it hasn't played real well. So, I think overall you just got to be careful there.
Yeah, no question. You want to make sure you do not get, you want to get out to a good start and kind of just bury them early and take away any thoughts of, a potential upset. The leading scorer is Haley Girantano at 12-4, Alexis Horn at 12 points. Those are the only 2 players scoring in double figures this season. So again, similar to the men, Scott, I think this is a team that's going to want to slow the pace of Iowa. Good luck with that.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about the men and the possibilities of that. You're not going to do that with the women. They're going to play their pace, and you're just going to have to keep up. And that's, the one thing that could hurt Iowa to an extent early. I don't think they're going to lose. I think they're going to win decisively, probably 20 plus points. I think I'm being fair there. But I think 2 things that they're self-inflicted that could hurt them early. And that number 1 would be if they are, if there's a lot of turnovers, and if they quick shoot the ball and have a lot of misses early. It's like they get in transition, they pull up for 3 and they miss. And then, and then they get the ball back and they get it stolen, or they throw it out away and play really sloppy. Then I think you can keep them in the game for a little while. If I'm Iowa, don't do that. Just say, let's play our game, but let's be disciplined, at least early on. And then you get into the flow of the game and you're up 10 and you want to quick shoot the ball, and Caitlin Clark pulls up from the logo and drains a 3. Good. But maybe avoid it for the first couple minutes of the game, just so you can, impose your will. Because I think if Iowa plays disciplined and smart, this is a game that could end up 105 to 68.
Yeah, no doubt. And you don't want to take anything for granted and, rest your players and get into that mode. But an easy first round game can certainly be beneficial in such a long grind of a tournament. And, and certainly capable teams in that second game. We saw last year, Creighton was a 10 and was able to benefit from the way the game was called and got its style and its pace of play. And you figure Florida State or Georgia is going to want to muck it up a little bit if it gets Iowa. Either one gets Iowa. You look at it, and from a Florida State perspective, I was looking, Scott, played Purdue in November and Wisconsin the first day of December, beat Purdue by a point, beat Wisconsin by 5. And those are teams that Iowa handled pretty easily. So that bodes well. Again, different matchups, you can't, it's not a direct comparison. Georgia also played Wisconsin and beat Wisconsin by 8 in the Virgin Islands. So again, the Iowa 2 seeds should come out of this and make it to the second weekend. You look at Iowa, Scott, and you look at the bracket here. The above them, the 3 seed is Duke.
Yeah.
The 6 seed's Colorado. Then you've got Middle Tennessee State in there and Iona. Would have been good if Iona and Iowa played. Everybody was rooting for that, but
yeah,
you know, chance to get Duke in that regional semifinal, and then obviously Stanford is at the top of that bracket. Some other teams in there. Louisville is a 5. Drake is the 12. Texas, which lost to Iowa State in the women's Big 12 championship game, is the 4 seed in there. So, you know, not an impossible task to make the Final Four. I certainly think that is the Elite 8 is certainly a reasonable goal. And I wrote in my column, if you make the Sweet 16, that's good. I think Iowa's made it, you know, 8, 9 times. I can't remember. I don't have it on the top of my head, but 8 or 9 times, I think, in program history to the Sweet 16. So anytime you make the Sweet 16 in this tournament, that should be looked upon fondly.
Yeah. But I also would think, you know, there's no way to stop your dreams from beyond that right now. I mean, I think when you have a number 2 seed by chalk, you're expected to go to the regional finals, and it's in Seattle, which is interesting in its own right to be that far away. But, you know,
what are the other regional areas?
There's just 2.
So that's right. You know, why are they doing that?
They feel like it saves. I'm sure, you know, they were not going to mention this, but saves on expenses.
Yeah, that's true.
You can have a one site. You can have 4 teams and 2. Or
what's the other one?
Greenville, South Carolina. Or
neither one's close really for Iowa fans.
Right. Yeah. So it's not like they had one in St. Louis or something. It's like
I'd rather go to Seattle. Yeah. But I'm sure there are other people that would rather go to Carolina.
I went to Seattle in 2015 when Iowa men played there, and UNI men played there too.
Yep. I was there as well. I enjoyed the city.
Yeah, it was a good city. Did you go to the Pop Culture Museum while you were there?
I did not. I went to Jimi Hendrix gravesite though.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Took the bus out there, spent afternoon out there. It was a very moving experience. Big Jimi Hendrix fan.
Okay. I went to the Pop Culture Museum of Seattle, which was awesome. It was awesome is the way I describe it. And I'm kind of, you know, the grunge guy, but also they had a lot of stuff with Jimi Hendrix and you know, and then also they had this sound room. It was incredible where you could feel what it's like to try to call plays at the Seattle football stadium as an opposing quarterback.
That's cool.
And the loud, I mean, you're talking about 100 whatever decibels, 30 decibels or whatever it is. And you can't hear yourself yell. It's incredible. So anyway, if anybody goes there, I would recommend that. It's not that far from the Space Needle. So, and
did you go up in the Space Needle?
I just went to it. I didn't go up in it.
So did I. Yeah. I walked by, but did not venture up into the needle.
Mm-hmm. I was, you know, not only with Iowa there, but I was working for the Gazette at the time and also doing some UNI work. That was a pretty busy term, you know, and Halas and I were both there. And so we were like, both of us had to write from both games. And it was like back to back. That can be a real chore, especially the second day, because they were really late games.
Yeah, I remember that.
Because that's what happens, you know. So Sacramento, it's a good thing Iowa's not there, you know. But
yeah.
But no, Seattle's cool. I'm glad they're going there. You know, chances are they'll probably play Duke and then probably Stanford. You know, and then if they survive that, then they'll be playing, you know, probably South Carolina in the Final Four. And so that, to me, that's one that, you know, they're not going to be favored in. I can tell you.
Yeah, you know, I haven't talked to many women's basketball fans. I don't know what their expectations are for this team. I think everybody has that memory of how it ended last year. Mm-hmm. So I think probably there is a little bit of caution knowing that anything can happen. But I'm with you. I think get to that second weekend, you exhale, and say, all right, we made it to the second weekend. Let's go from here. But I think it's that line between the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. Sweet 16 had, go out in the Sweet 16. Is that failure is a bit extreme. Disappointment. I think what's that level of disappointment? And then same with Elite Eight. You get right to that doorstep of that Final Four and not able to punch through. Who'd they lose to in Megan's last year in the Elite Eight? Was it Baylor?
Baylor. Yeah. So, they had an elite team. They were really good. And, their coach now is at LSU that everybody loves.
She's a sweetheart.
She's as nice as it gets. So, now I think the thing is, though, and we talked about legacy with the men's team, that this is the one thing kind of missing on Lisa's resume too, is a Final Four, is that statement, because she's the winningest coach in Big Ten history for women. She's the number 4 in all Big Ten history for wins, behind Gene Katie's third, and she's not that far away from him. Did
you see him at the Big Ten tournament yesterday? That was great.
Yeah, he's battling through some health issues.
I know. Like. I'm happy to see him.
Yeah,
he was one of my favorite guys to cover in the Big Ten. Just the complete opposite 180 of the idiot that was in Bloomington.
Yes. Well, that was such a golden era, Rob, of coaches. Guys that I grew up watching, and that's, not to switch back to men's, but man, you think back to the 80s and early 90s and stuff that's the golden era of Big Ten basketball, when you had Lou Henson and the Robert Montgomery Knight, and Gene Katie and Judd Heathcote and Tom Davis, and, just some larger than life figures, and they all wore suits, and Heathcote's talking about the ghosts in the old arena there, and you got Lou Henson wearing orange, and and Bob Knight being Bob Knight, and kind of Fran before Fran, right? Except he really carried it off the court too. But it was it's a shame. But going back to Lisa, I think that this is one where this is kind of a legacy defining season. You're a 2 seed that could have been a 1. You've won the Big Ten tournament for the second straight year. You've got an opportunity to kind of put that exclamation point on that resume as a probable Hall of Fame coach. I wrote about her last week, and this is the kind of the impact. But she's got such a wonderful personality that really relates so well with everybody. But this is the one thing missing, and I think if she can get to the Final Four, it would do wonders, not only for her program, but I think for the fan base right now, which, we talked about with the men's fans. Football's the same way, that I think this could be just kind of this feels good moment for the fan base.
Yeah, it would be great to have a nice run by both, or at least one of these teams. And again, expectations are certainly different for each. I think the women, math in my head, combined the last 2 seasons heading into this tournament, 50-14. That's elite. That's among the best in the country. So really, you've established yourself as a factor. Now you have to go out and prove it in the tournament that matters the most.
Right. And, what's fascinating is the second game will probably be, I wouldn't be surprised if it's an ABC game like last year. I mean, they got 1 million viewers for that second game against Creighton.
They could put that on Sunday at like 11 or noon, like start the day with that.
Yep. That's what they did then. And so if whether it's Florida State or Georgia, people will tune in. And with the men's tournament, the second day, the round of 32 games, there's usually only about 1 game on early like that. They spread them out a little bit more than they used to.
Yep.
So this could be, you could get another 1 million. And then if you're talking about the difference between Creighton and Iowa versus an SEC team in Iowa, the viewership will go up from there. It could be like 1.3 million, which again is just astounding.
Yeah, I would encourage people to check out Scott's article on Lisa Bluter from last week. It's a good read. You had we can finish up with this. I don't know if you published this today, but I first saw it today and haven't had a chance to read it yet. But your predictions for Iowa football players in the NFL draft, where they may head. I don't want to ruin that. I encourage people to buy the Athletic subscription. I own one. Enjoy. Really, I love Scott's work on there, but used a lot for fantasy baseball. Really good fantasy baseball writers. Eno is tremendous. Really good fantasy baseball writers at the Athletic. So if you're into fantasy sports, pro sports, whatever, it's got you covered. It's really well worth your money. And I encourage you guys to go check out Scott's NFL article. Anything you want to tease us with out of that thing?
Yeah, I looked at all these different, the scenarios for these players, and how I stacked it was I went through kind of the main mock drafts where they ended up, who had who going where.
How much do those change from now into the draft? Now that the combine's over, are these the mock drafts? Will there not be much change between now and the draft?
Oh, the mock drafts will change a couple more times because it's just.
Do they do that because they think that's what's going to happen, or do they do that to get people to come and look at the mock drafts?
I think it's a little of both.
Okay.
But I also think, here's what some of them say, and I know them, so I know that they talked to somebody in the league who said this. Of course, it's all lying season is what we know it as.
Right.
And so everybody's lying to each other and lying, especially to media. So then false rumors get out there. But, from reading the tea leaves a little bit, and part of this was with the Chicago Bears trading down from number 1 to number 9 with the Carolina Panthers.
Were you good with that trade?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're getting DJ Moore, along with 2 1s, 2 2s, and DJ Moore.
I'm sure he's happy the hell to be out of Carolina.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and beat in Chicago. I mean, that's great. And the thing was with the Bears, you look at the free agent market today, there aren't any really good receivers or top upper echelon. So and to trade somebody for, they would have to give up a 2. And even then for this team, they need all the draft picks, that they can get. And so I think.
Is this a good receiver draft?
Not really. There's about 2 or 3 that I think are, you don't have a Jamar Chase. Let's put it that way. You don't have anybody. And so getting their number 1 receiver and being able to still pick in the top 10, I think is really good this year. Plus getting an extra 2 this year, a number 1 next year. I look at Lucas Van Ness going to Chicago
with the 9.
With the 9, because their defense was so pathetic last year, especially for a franchise that stakes its whole identity on toughness and defense. It's one thing to not be good at quarterback, because that's pretty much been par for the course, but defense, that's been what they've hung their hat on for 100 years. So they only had 20 sacks last year, and Philadelphia had 70. So you got to make that up, and I'm sure they will with some free agency, because they have a ton of money. But you're going to also need somebody, and looking at the way Lucas Van Ness performed, not only at the combine, but throughout his career, how he's in the trajectory that he's on, he makes perfect sense. And then you throw on, this is just an addition to it, but he grew up a Bears fan in Barrington, hometown guy, wants to be a Bear, plays like a Bear. That's the kind of guy you want building your franchise around. So
Kevin Warren should be familiar with him.
Who knows? They could use some. I'm glad he's going to the Bears. Let's put it that way. but no, I had him, and then of course not to get too far out there, I had Jack Campbell and Sam Laporta go in the second round, and then Riley Moss at the top of the 4th, but I think he could be a 3rd as well, and Kayvon going in the 5th. And Kayvon, it's when you start to get into Kayvon territory, and I think he's still going to be, he could be a 4th or 5th or 6th rounder, just kind of depends on the team. But what I expect for him, and I had him going to Minnesota, and here's why. This was a bad defensive team. It was a good team overall, but a bad defensive side of the ball. It's cash strapped, has no salary cap money to speak of, and it doesn't have a lot of capital in the draft. It has like 5 draft picks. So what you need is somebody who maximizes your draft picks. There are times when Minnesota used to have like 15 draft picks, and so you just kind of waste it on a guy that, okay, well, he was a 5-star and never produced, and maybe he just was in a bad system, or this guy got in trouble, we'll just take a flyer. You can't afford to do that. And Kayvon, is a safe player. Is the ceiling as high as some other players? I don't know, probably not, but he's a guy that could come in and play for you right away, play special teams, be an asset in your locker room, and do everything you ask him to do in the right way, and probably play a lot for you, if nothing else, special teams. So that's why I had him. Those are some of the side factors that I think about when I start slotting guys, especially late in the draft. And I haven't put in the likely free agents, John Wagner, Seth Benson, or Monty Potabom. But maybe after pro day next week, I'll start really examining those.
Yeah, we're a week from pro day, Iowa pro day, Scott. What are your kind of thoughts heading into that? Who's looking to help themselves there? Will the combine guys work out? Why don't you give people a little bit of insight in what they can expect next week? Because I don't know if we'll have a podcast until after that pro day.
I wouldn't work out if I was any of them. I thought they all performed so well at the combine that they don't need to work out and, improve their 40 time or whatever. I mean, it would, in fact, I think if you went for the 40, that you can only subject yourself to maybe injury, a tweaked hamstring or something like that. But it's all, as we know, it's always vital for those players who are, who aren't going to be drafted. How do they perform? What does John Wagner show? What are the others show? And I think Seth Benson's going to be an interesting one because he played really well this year. And he's kind of like Jack Sanborn was last year, the Wisconsin linebacker who the Bears signed as a free agent. And then by midseason, he was playing well and he started, and he actually played pretty well for the Bears. I think Seth Benson's that kind of guy that he's going to go to a camp based on what he does, not only just workout wise, but how he talks to these scouts and stuff. It's going to be a real impact on him on getting in the right place. And then he'll have an opportunity to make a team. John Wagner, I'm really fascinated with him because kind of like with Matt Nelson, I almost wonder if he'd be better off moving to the other side of the ball. He reminded me a lot of Brian Madison, who did the same thing.
Yeah.
Not as much Matt Kroll who did, but definitely Brian Madison, not as big as Matt Nelson. But I think he's a guy that if he flipped over to the other side of the ball and he got like a 2-year flyer on the practice team somewhere, could he, become an offensive lineman? That's something to think about. And if that happens, then you go, damn, he should have been an offensive lineman at Iowa because they could have really used him there. Potabom it's hard to say. I think he's a workout warrior. There are just so few teams that use fullbacks exclusively. But I think he's got a chance to sign as a free agent. And then if he performs well, maybe make it. I mean, I'm sure some teams will look at his mullet and laugh, and other teams will go, damn, that's the kind of guy we need.
Yeah, no doubt. It's and those guys what's good for the combine guys too is they can meet with teams at pro day, maybe that they didn't get to in Indianapolis, maybe set up visits to these cities. So that's kind of the next phase, right? Where you kind of tie up, the last stages here before they begin the selection process.
Yeah, for sure. And, and again, the combine guys all got to meet with players, even like Riley Moss and Kayvon Merriweather met with a lot of them in the Senior Bowl. So they got to see him practice. They got to see him perform in Indy. They don't really need to see him perform on the field. And probably maybe 1 or 2 teams might try to bring him in for a visit, but they've already kind of conducted their time with them. But it is so important for John Wagner, for Seth Benson, for for Monty Potabom. And I don't know who's going to return, but a lot of times former players out of the league get that opportunity too. One person that pops into my mind would be Davion Nixon, who got cut a couple of times last year from a couple of different teams. That this might be an opportunity for him to come and work out, talk to teams on campus, maybe a few others from the recent past that either didn't make it or our free agents can work out or just be there. And that's always helpful for them too. So I would expect a lot of conversation. It's a weird day for us in some ways because it's always like, hey, show up around 12:30, 1 o'clock and one person will trickle out. But the media has to respect that is a job interview day for them. And the athletes that, this is an opportunity to talk to GMs, coaches, scouts, and really emphasize why they should be a part of that organization. So it's a fascinating day, and Iowa State does it the next day. So I'll probably be at both. Iowa State actually lets you watch. So that's always cool.
Iowa used to do that years and years ago. Do some of the underclassmen, or I don't say underclassmen, but guys that aren't in this draft, do they participate in this at all?
I don't.
I thought I remember Noah Fant running one year before, but I could be wrong with that. My memory sucks.
I don't think so. No, I take that back. They can participate in certain ways. Spencer Petras was throwing routes. I think it was last year, and now he can't do it this year, obviously, and I wouldn't expect Cade McNamara to do it either. So I don't know, maybe
Joey Labus.
Yeah, could be Joey Labus, but they don't really have any receivers.
No. And I don't think Laporte is going to be running routes.
No, I don't think so. I don't think he needs to. I don't even think he'll do anything because what he ran, I went through all the times for historical purposes. He was the third fastest in the 40 of any Iowa tight end ever. Just Fant and Kittle. We're a little bit. He's like 4.59, and I think Kittle was 4.50, Fant was, and then Kittle was like 4.52. So he did enough, and there's no need to tweak your hamstring like Chad Greenway did, back in 2006.
Yeah, no need for any of that to happen. I guess that'll do it, folks. We got through an hour and a half or so of tournament preview. I appreciate you guys adjusting to our schedule this week. We probably will not be back until next week with the Hotspot podcast. But we have podcasts throughout the week. I'll be back tomorrow for the mailbag. If I didn't get to anything today, we can talk about it tomorrow on the mailbag. But we appreciate all of you folks for listening. Thank you so much to our sponsors. And we should be back regularly scheduled time tomorrow, but we could be at the mercy of what's going on in the NCAA tournament as well. So we will let you guys know. But until then, have a good rest of your week, and we will talk to you